Today we are in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, at the site of a 1940 train collision that violently claimed 44 souls, altered the lives of the victims' families, and changed the rail system from that point forward. This is a tragic tale of one of the worst train disasters in the state's history that was almost lost to time until 3 middle school students decided to resurrect and dedicate the tale of the Doodlebug Disaster. This story is not for the faint of heart, so if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. Doodlebugs filled in rail service gaps as the perfect multi-purpose rail vehicle, serving as passenger trains, utility engines, and even mail carriers. The self-propelled gasoline-powered rail cars were given the name Doodle due to their bug-like appearance and slower speeds. They were perfect for commuter runs where large coal-fed engines would prove to be too costly for the rails to run. On July 31st, 1940, Doodlebug number 4648 left Hudson, Ohio at 5:49 p.m., heading south to Akron, with the instructions to pull into a siding near Silver Lake to allow a northbound Pennsylvania freight train traveling from Columbus to Cleveland to pass on through the single-track railway section. Thomas Murtaugh was the engineer of the Doodlebug, which was carrying 43 passengers and 3 crew. Murtaugh had made this short commuter run several times in his career and even had a penchant for being on schedule. On this day, the train was again running on schedule and would make the siding in plenty of time to let the 73-car, 4,000-ton freight train pass. But the siding came and went, and the Doodlebug continued forward inexplicably. The Doodlebug's constructor had finished collecting tickets from the passengers when he realized that they had not stopped at the siding. He hurried to the front of the Doodlebug to find out why the engineer had not stopped as instructed. By the time he reached the engineer, the freight train was rounding the bend in front of them. Both the Doodlebug and the freight train engineers threw on their brakes, which sparked and squealed like banshees, but it was already too late. All 3 crew members dove off the train, leaving the 43 passengers to their fiery fate as the 2 trains collided here at 55 miles per hour with a force estimated at 500 million pounds. Akron resident W.J. Payne was stopped at the rail crossing, waiting for the Doodlebug to pass. He actually watched it disappear into the trees behind me. He was about ready to step on the accelerator when he heard the 2 trains collide. As he looked up, he saw the fiery Doodlebug being pushed back up the tracks northbound by the freight train. The Doodlebug was pushed north about a quarter of a mile up the track, with flames leaping 25 feet out of the passenger compartment in all directions. The roaring flames from the heat were so intense that Mr. Payne thought he was on fire, so he jumped from his vehicle and rolled down the embankment, cutting his knee in the process. Mr. Payne soon realized that he was not on fire. He was just feeling the searing heat from the flames of the Doodlebug. Local residents, firefighters, and ambulances rushed to the horrific scene, which posed difficult to reach, since the now stopped freight train was blocking the road and access to the Doodlebug. Charred bodies and limbs of the passengers were hanging from the Doodlebug windows. As rescuers grabbed at the passengers to try to pull them to safety, skin pulled from the bone. Soon the searing heat proved too powerful, and all attempts at rescue were abandoned. Firefighters from Station 1 battled the blaze for over 45 minutes, but it took an hour for them to remove the bodies from the wreckage, most of which needing saws to separate the bodies from the seats that their bodies had been fused to by the flames. First responders would later describe the scene as horrific devastation and the worst tragedy they had ever seen. Bodies piled 6 or 7 deep, crushed to the front and sides of the train. The coroner later determined that only 9 of the 43 passengers died on impact. The rest were burned alive in the wreckage from the exploding gasoline. A 44th victim was a 70-year-old woman who died of an apparent heart attack after witnessing the disaster. Blame for the accident laid at the feet of the engineer. No one could fathom why Murtaugh would disregard his written orders and drive past this sighting, continue headlong into a collision with a freight train. It was later revealed that weeks before, Murtaugh had complained of severe headaches from the emissions that collected in the train due to the exhaust of the gasoline engine. Officials speculated that Murtaugh either briefly lost consciousness or became disoriented as a result of these emissions. After recovering from his injuries from jumping off the train, Murtaugh returned to his duties with the railroad, but spoke to no one about the incident, other than the accident investigators. Doodlebugs across the nation were retrofitted with diesel engines after the accident, since flammable diesel fuel is safer than gasoline, which is combustible. But for the victims and their families, it was too little and too late. A lawsuit was filed against the rail line, and the families of the victims were awarded a grand total of $600,000 in compensation. The tragic events of July 31st, 1940, eventually faded from public consciousness. That is until one fateful day in 2005, when a Cuyahoga Falls middle school teacher issued a class assignment that was spearheaded by 3 exceptional students. These 3 students rallied their classroom and their community to erect a monument memorializing those who lost their lives in the disaster. This monument sits only feet away from the abandoned rail tracks This monument sits only feet away from the now abandoned rail tracks where the crash occurred. The Doodlebug Memorial Garden was dedicated July 31st, 2005, 65 years to the day of the disaster. Throngs of people showed up to commemorate those who perished in the tragedy. The 3 middle school students and the city's mayor unveiled this beautiful monument that will forever stand as a testament to those who perished on this site that fateful day in 1940. A day that, but for the efforts of 3 middle school students, was almost lost to time. Thank you for watching today, folks. If you would please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I love hearing from you. And I'll see you next time as we explore more curious history. Take care. So, future me here just wanted to insert that in the research of the Doodlebug, we were trying to come up with the exact location of where the Doodlebug finally rested after it was pushed about a quarter of a mile up the track. And we found it. We're very certain that what you're looking at here, this grove of trees, was the final resting place of the train itself, and the fiery tomb, as it were, for the 43 men, women, and children. We've looked at a lot of pictures that are historical to the event, and John's going to throw them up now to kind of show you what we're talking about. So let's start with where we thought the final resting place would be. I'm not sure we have an impact photo, but we do have a photo that I found from the Akron Beacon Journal that shows a large group of people standing at an intersection over there, looking down the tracks this way. And that kind of gave us an idea of where we should be looking. Behind you is a business that's been here for almost 100 years. It's called Tucker Supply. And the moniker for that building is clearly seen on the left-hand side of the inset picture John's showing you right now. So we had a visual of where the train was in relation to Tucker Supply. The next video that we're going to show you, John's throwing that up right now, is a picture of the back side of the Doodlebug, the side that isn't crushed, so we know it's the back side, engulfed in flames. And it is adjacent to that building right there. We've also been able to line up some of the windows. Obviously, there have been retrofits to this building, but there are some windows on this building that fit perfectly. The size and shape of the building, you lose the length of the building behind the Doodlebug itself. But when you triangulate all of these things, where Tucker Supply is, where this building is, this grove of trees, I'm convinced, is where the Doodlebug landed finally after being pushed up the track by the freight train. There are also documented reports of the train itself blocking the roads because it's 43. It's a long train, right? And after it hit the Doodlebug, it came to a complete stop. Emergency vehicles, like I said earlier in the video, had trouble getting to the Doodlebug because they couldn't cross the road. There was a train sitting in front of it. You put all of those things together, and folks, unfortunately, I give you the final resting place of the Doodlebug.